You may have first seen my next guest as a member of the band Van Halen. Of course, these days he is far better known as the creative force behind the band Mammoth WVH, and it's always a pleasure to speak to the Wolfgang Van Halen. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, man. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about the last few months because I know much of it was out on the road with Alter Bridge, who I can't help but think is a fun band to watch night after night.
Oh yeah, they're the best. We're definitely spoiled to be able to watch them every night. It's amazing. But yeah, it's been quite busy. Right before we went to Europe for like 2 months with Alter Bridge, I was in the studio for a month, and then when we got back, I had another month to be able to finish what I was doing, and then went on tour again, and then took a tiny break, and now I'm on this tour.
Very quickly, what was the tiny break? What did you do?
Gosh, it was only like a week and a half, I think, and most of it was spent working on the new album stuff. We ended up
But
filming a video.
that's not really a break then. It's you just
No,
work
not
through
really.
it. You've always struck me as one of those types of folks who you just prefer to get up and be working on something fun and creative day after day.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm lucky to be able to do what I do, and it's a very fun, creative thing to be doing, especially now uh, on the precipice of coming out with a new album. So it's really exciting.
Now let's talk timeline for the record, for the new record. Fractured though I think it may have been, kind of walk me through the writing and recording and producing of this thing, because again, you were doing it, I think, piece by piece.
Yeah, but it certainly wasn't nearly as fractured as recording the first one. The first one was recorded over 3 years, over 10 or 11 different sessions. But this one, it was 2 sessions, and it was all in the same place up at 5150. We just before I went on tour, we recorded all the music, and then when I got back, I did all the vocals. So yeah, it was actually really really quick, almost too fast. But it was really fun to be able to have pulled it off in that amount of time in comparison to how long it took the first one to do.
Too fast because you would have liked a bit more time to sort of savor the moments.
Maybe, but I don't think it really even matters now, because on the other side of it, having the finished product, I think it's better than the first album. So I guess it worked.
And certainly there's a long history of records of all genres that if bands are given all the time they want, things don't really ever get finished.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's that old adage of you have your whole life to do your first record and only a couple months to do your second. But I think it actually worked out in our favor this time, which is exciting.
The obvious question would be, what did you learn on the first go around making a record? And again, you've been around music your whole life, but for Mammoth WVH, what did you do the first time that you did differently this time?
I think the most important thing that was done on the first that I didn't need to do on the second one was figuring out what Mammoth was and like who I was as my own songwriter. And now, since we already came into the second album knowing that, it was more fun to kind of challenge and push the boundary of what that was instead of trying to figure out what it was in the first place.
And when you say challenge and push, give me examples of that in the studio.
I think this album in certain spots is a lot heavier than the first album ever had. I think you can hear that in the first single, and on the rest of the album, there's a lot of stuff that I think would have been weird to hear on the first album. But if you've heard the first one now, and then coming to this one, it feels like an evolution.
And everything you've done, though, whether it was the heavier stuff that you've done before, or I don't want to say lighter fare, but not quite as heavy, there's always hooks. There's always interesting things to listen to, as opposed to it being just a wall of
Exactly.
agree, disagree, and how do you get to that end?
Yeah, melody comes first with me for everything. So no matter how heavy the track gets, there's going to be something. The vocals are going to be melodic. That's just how I write my music. It's very important.
Are
Melody
you
first.
more a guitar writer or a piano writer?
Guitar,
Yeah.
certainly. A piano is really just like, oh, I programmed something and I'm going to figure out how to play it later.
Are you still in the process of learning things? Again, you strike me as the type of person who would walk into a studio, and if you saw something you didn't understand or know how to work it, you'd probably be like a dog with a bone and just get on it until you figured it out.
Yeah. I love being able to try new things and trying to you know get good at them. But I think this time around it was fun to walk in with confidence on what we've done before, and I think that allowed me to challenge myself as a singer and as a guitar player, mostly with this album, and I think it really shows.
From the last go round, and let's include both making the first Mammoth record and the ensuing touring, what did you learn about being a vocalist? What did you learn about how to deliver a performance in the studio or on stage, and also keep yourself from shredding your throat?
Yeah, I think the only thing I do to not shred my throat is I try not to raise my voice too much off stage. I kind of keep it for the stage, you know. Um, then that's really all I've found. I think just doing it just strengthens, the muscle. And really, other than that, I think that's all uh, that I really carried with me through the tour into recording. Because I think I sound more like a singer on this album rather than somebody be trying to be a singer on the first one. And I think, I'm proud of what I pulled off on the first album, but this one I think I really came into my own as a vocalist.
Do you have any sort of regimens in the studio before you do vocals, or before or after you go on stage? Tea with honey and lemon, hot sauce. There's all sorts of crazy recipes.
I do have one emergency thing where if my vocals are if my voice feels rough, I have this peppermint tea with honey that helps. But also there's a thing that my dad and I always did throughout the Van Halen days where the Ricola throat drops. Chances are I always have one in my mouth during a show because it just keeps it, you know, ready to go.
If I'm really rough for the air, I have something I call the dip after the thing that killed Tunes in Roger Rabbit. And I forget the full recipe, but it essentially, if you have anything on your vocal cords, it will burn them off, probably along with the top layer of skin on the cords. But by God, it'll clean you out, you know.
That's great.
I'll get you the recipe one of these
Yeah, I'll
days
need it. I'd love to
in
try
case
it.
of horrible emergency, because it tastes horrible, but by
Hey
God,
man,
it'll open.
you got to do what you got to do.
Now then, let's talk about lyrical content for this record. Did you write while you're in the studio? Were you salting stuff away? Kind of walk me through the entire process.
I think I always carry stuff like on my phone where it's like if I'm just kind of thinking to myself, I write stuff, but mostly, I do melody first, and that kind of leads where the lyrics go. So a lot of the lyrics were written, within the time of before recording in that whole same session and stuff. And I found that if the first album was a bit more outward in terms of the perspective and what I was writing at, uh this second album feels a lot more inward and writing towards myself, and I think it kind of just reflects the thought process of every of at least what I've been going through the last couple of years, but I think just overall reflects what everybody has been going through since 2020 and all that.
Yeah, I mean that was going to be my follow up. That how much of the stuff happening outside of your world was affecting what was happening inside of your head.
Yeah, I've always had quite the affected head, if you will. But I think what the world went through certainly didn't help anybody at all in general, on top of people who already kind of had that thought process in their head like me. So yeah, it really yeah, the album turned out a bit more. I'd been listening to it, for sequencing and stuff, and I was like, wow, yeah, these lyrics are a lot more inward and at myself than the first one for sure.
And all of that certainly leads into a single called Another Celebration at the End of the World. So, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. What kind of background can you give into the tune?
I mean, with that one, it just came about because I felt like the first album, while I was super proud of it, I feel like it didn't have enough like super upbeat, up tempo, just straight up like punky songs. And so that's kind of how this one came about. It was just that desire to have a super fast, super heavy song. And I think it came together quite nicely.
I grew up in New Jersey myself, which was a pretty cool place to be because it was an hour to New York and Philadelphia and a lot of Jersey stuff going on. So musically, there was always things happening. For you in LA, if you're any kind of a punk fan, it must have been heaven growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, I grew up on, or at least, pop punk and stuff. So but I mean, even the bridge in this song, it almost feels like Metallica-y almost. It's just very thrashy, punky. It was fun to kind of, I mean, I guess that's where I was getting to, just kind of pushing what Mammoth is, in a direction that wasn't really shown on the first album.
And Wolf, you mentioned sequencing. That is a favorite topic of mine when talking to folks about creating records, because I don't know that a lot of music fans understand the amount of agita and worry that goes into sequencing a record. Tell me about the process for two.
Yeah, I care very much about sequencing and how the record flows. And this one particularly, I'm super stoked with, because I think it lends well to a vinyl record perfectly, because it's split up. It's 10 songs and it's split up 5 and 5. And the 5th song and the 10th song are both really long, so they feel like a good close to each of the sides, if you will. So I think it flows really well.
Now you've got this thing done. You've worked hard. It's the culmination of years of work, pouring your heart and soul into these tunes. Now you got to sit around until August till everyone can hear the whole thing. That would drive me insane. That would drive me absolutely nuts.
Yeah, but I think with the first album, I had waited, years for people to hear it, so I think I can figure out how to do it. Plus, getting the first song out there, and especially the video, I think everybody's gonna really, if they enjoyed the Don't Back Down video, they're really gonna enjoy the Another Celebration video. It's really fun.
And tell me about packaging and artwork and everything, because, and I've seen the art for the new record. I will go back on the record and say that I thought the first Mammoth WVH album cover was one of the best album covers the last 25 years. Yeah, you and I spoke about that completely, but tell me about creating all of the stuff around the music for this go round.
Yeah, I mean, this cover, just like the first one, is by an artist named John Brosio, and it was a piece that he had already made that I just thought perfectly fit the vibe of what we were going through with this one. And I love that it's definitely a different vibe in comparison to, like the Big Crab and everything. But I think it really reflects, if the album wasn't called Mammoth II, I think Another Celebration at the End of the World would be a fitting title, considering what the whole picture looks like, so.
Have you ever spoken to him about what his dreams are like? Because he seems like a guy with an odd subconscious.
He's a creative, I think. Just like all of us creatives, we think in weird ways, but I think that helps.
Tis both a blessing and a curse, isn't it?
I guess so.
Well, I'm really excited to speak to you. I can't wait to hear the rest of the record, Wolf, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing the band out and about. One last quick thing. You're hitting the road with a band that you mentioned earlier, Metallica. When you get around a group, and again, you've sort of been around really good musicians from literally the second you were born. But when you're around a group like that, and you get to Walter Bridge is another good example. When you get to see them night after night, what are you watching for from them? What are you looking to learn?
I just love to see how band units and their whole organization operate, because everyone does differently. It's really fun to see how I don't know, just how they move their ship, how it gets done. So I'm really fascinated to see the insane size of the way Metallica operate. I'm really excited to see how they do it. It's a fascinating thing to me, because it takes so many people, so many important people putting together all their work to make everything happen. It's really fascinating.
And what makes a good band member? Not musician, totally separate thing. What makes a good band member, a musician operating as part of a unit?
I think why things are working so well for us in Mammoth is that it's a family first. You have to be able to to live with each other. You know, sure, it's great if you happen to be great musicians. Obviously, you want to be a good band, but more importantly, you need to be able to live together. And so it's important, and I think that's great because we all love each other, and we're, you know, great buds, we're brothers, and we just, you know, we're a happy family out here playing music and having a good time. That's all it should be.
Wolf, it's always great to speak music with you. I know we'll do it again soon before the record, and I'll see you out on the road as well.
You got it. Looking forward to it, man.